to jump into full self-driving. All right, so this is, obviously it leads into robotaxi, and we'll get into some of my questions there, but full self-driving, I felt or still feel that this is a little slow in coming to reality. Elon has promised or stated Q2 looks like going to be the release date for the subscription model. Do you feel like FSD is going to be able to make it in Q2?
So I don't really worry so much with sort of like, what do we mean by make it? I think that...
I want it.
Right. So I believe that they're going to release version 9 of FSD beta, which you probably don't have the beta.
No.
And I think they're going to release version 9 of the beta soon. And there's a great interview. I mentioned Andrej Karpathy before. There's a great interview with Andrej Karpathy on the Robot Brains podcast. And what I pieced together, what I see from Andrej Karpathy, from Elon Musk, and from a guy named Jim Keller, who was interviewed by Lex Friedman a year or two ago. I think it's imminent that FSD will become better than human drivers. And, you know, it's tricky when you say better than human drivers, like, well, which human driver? There's a lot of bad human drivers, right? And there's some really good human drivers. Of course, you and I are great drivers, right? We know that we're great drivers. We always think that we're the great drivers, but there's a lot of bad drivers out there. So I think it's sort of like, well, what's the standard you're setting here? And like, so I think the subscription model is a different question from when FSD will be good enough to be able to drive on its own, right? Completely, you know, human not involved in the driving. I think human not needed for driving is probably coming by the end of this year or early next year, maybe sooner, maybe Q3. It's just sort of how quickly does it learn? Version 9 is a very major revision to FSD, where instead of looking at 8 individual cameras one at a time and sort of figuring out what to do, the software stitches all the cameras together, and all the decisions are made based on a 3D moving, not a individual picture, still images, but a 3D moving clip of everything around the vehicle.
Yeah, it's full spatial design. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
They call it bird's eye view. Andrej Karpathy calls it the bird's eye view. That will radically accelerate the improvement of FSD. And I think that Karpathy and Elon already have it in their cars that they're driving, and they're seeing radical improvement. It's actually one of the tricky things is like, how would you measure the improvement? How do you measure how well it's doing? And that's actually a conversation I've been having. And that interview that Karpathy had, he really touched on that a couple of times. I don't know how technically you want to get, but I feel like I think it's getting better fast.
It's going to be in the amount of interventions.
No, that's my point. Okay.
You don't think it will be?
I think interventions is one measure. I made a video about this. It's a fairly recent video I made about with Karpathy. If you search my channel for Karpathy, you just look, probably in my last 10 videos, I made a video going over his interview. So here's the problem. When it gets better than human, then most human interventions are wrong. So interventions are no longer a good measure.
Good point.
So you have to measure against other things. So for example, what are the tasks that FSD is doing? So FSD is driving along and it identifies objects. And it makes predictions about where will that object move. Right? So if it sees a stop sign, it should, number one, identify it as a stop sign, and number two, predict that it won't move, because stop signs usually don't move, right? Mm-hmm. There may be exceptions. You know, if the stop sign's on an arm, right? You know, then maybe the stop sign would move on an arm, but it should identify objects and it should predict where they're going to move. So he talked about this. He says, well, what if the identification flickers? Like it's looking at something, it says that's a stop sign. No, it's not a stop sign. Yes, it is a stop sign. Or yeah, it's a stop sign. It's a yield sign. It's a stop sign. If it's not consistent in its identification, then that's something that needs to be improved. And if it's getting more consistent in its identifications, that's a sign it's getting better. If it predicts that this object will not move, and then it does move, well, that's a mistake. If it consistently predicts that objects won't move, and they don't move, that's better. And then it's supposed to predict, like it sees a car. Where does it think that car is moving? And it makes predictions. And it, you know, you have to give some range of where it's moving. But if the car moves outside the range you predicted, then okay, that's something we got to get better at. So I think they're measuring the accuracy of predictions, the accuracy of identifications, and the accuracy of predicting movement. You know, you see a cat on the side of the road, you see a dog on the side of the road, you see a small child on the side of the road. They might move in different ways, and over time it learns to predict those movements better. And that's what it has to be measuring. And then I would say another thing it's probably trying to measure is what's the probability of crash, right? We want the probability of crash to go down, right? That's probably an important thing to optimize for. So there's a lot of different things that it has to look at. And, humans sometimes drive badly, right? Like we roll through stop signs. Robotaxi isn't supposed to roll through stop signs. So we don't want, if it rolls through, if it doesn't roll through a stop sign, if we're trying to stop it, we hit the gas. Is that a good intervention or a bad intervention?
Sure. Yeah, exactly.
So,
yeah. So we are seeing, currently we track, I don't know, about 900 different FSD drivers that have the beta in there.
Yeah.
The number, and basically what we're doing right now is just, through Speech IQ, if they're posting this out on any of the social platforms, we're looking at how many interventions potentially are being done. And it still seems like there's quite a bit of intervention there. So with that being the case.
Well, let me address that if I can. Can I address that?
Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
If FSD is driving in more situations, if it's driving in in more complex situations over time, then you're going to see more interventions or an equal number. The interventions aren't going to drop. Like there's probably no interventions on the interstate highways now, right? Right? Do you have FSD or autopilot?
No, I'm using autopilot, but and it's rare that you have to intervene on autopilot, but I have had to do it.
But it's learned how to drive on highways really well, interstate highways really well. So there's very few interventions. But you put it in increasingly complicated city environments, you're going to have more interventions. It's not because it's gotten worse. It's because you put it in more difficult situations, and it has to learn more difficult situations.
Well, I think that could be an argument, but there is a fixed data set of drivers that we're analyzing, and unless they're just recording, more interventions and less interventions, because we're measuring both successful trips and non-successful trips in comparison, and are they increasing with each beta release or I should say software update. It's interesting to track it because it has been rising, which I kind of thought it would be reducing, but if there is new software being implemented, possibly that's causing it.
Well, they're adding more features. It's capable of handling more areas.
Doubt.
So it's opening up more roads where it will work. And if it's opening up more places where it will work, then it's encountering more scenarios it hasn't seen, and it has to learn more. So, and also, as it gets better, sometimes the human interventions, you're going to have more cases where the human interventions are wrong. So you're driving your car and you don't see it, but a car is coming from the right and starts swerving into you, and the vehicle moves to avoid it, and you try to correct. Was that a good intervention or a bad intervention?
Yeah. I guess, here's my thing. I'm a Tesla, I would say a Tesla bull. I look at full self-driving and kind of just the evolution of where it has come from last year. I'm a big Elon fan, and I believe, I've followed him in his career since PayPal and before. And being in the tech industry, I know how long some of these things take to get true. What he's trying to do with full self-driving is nothing short of just Herculean. So being able to get it out to a space to where we're dealing with something that, has so much potential impact on mankind in general. I mean, if we can do this right, we're talking about saving, potentially tens of thousands of lives and injuries annually that are going to completely eliminate. Talk about, starting to disrupt industries.
A million lives a year, 1 million deaths a year on the roads in the world.
DUI, all the scenarios of that, all the infrastructure that goes around with insurance. I mean, this is mind-boggling what it could potentially do. When you look at that, and then I also analyze the number of engineers, and we've seen that are working on a project at any given time, and we've seen a big exodus over the last year in the full self-driving engineering group within Tesla. Almost 400 engineers actually flipped out. Plus you have the acquisition company with Forrest and Andola, which is basically Andrej Karpathy's predecessor, who left the company after a year. I'm just kind of curious, is there something happening in Tesla from a full self-driving state that could be delaying all of this to maybe later in the year?
No, it's accelerating. So what Karpathy talked about this, I don't think he talked about engineers leaving, but they call it project vacation. That when the software gets good enough, they won't have to do any work. And that's not completely true. The engineering side of full self-driving is becoming less demanding. And the real challenge is the car's driving, and the car fails to identify an object correctly, or fails to identify a situation. They may be identifying objects and situations. And they have a labeling team that is labeling objects or situations. So, it's the event comes back, they say, hey, we had a problem here. Okay, let's look at the video from this. Let's see if we can identify what this is. Let's see if we can teach the software to recognize that what that is for the future. The labelers are not engineers. They're skilled professionals, but they're not engineers. And my impression is the engineering side of FSD is actually becoming less important. The labeling side is becoming more important. They have established the engineering, they're satisfied with the chips they have, right? So that engineering side is gone. I think they're still working on engineering of Dojo, but the self-driving engineering, I haven't heard this before about employees leaving, but Karpathy talked about, as it gets better, there's less work for the engineers, there's more work for the labelers. And so the engineers have to manage the labelers, they have to communicate with each other. But it's a lot more about labeling now.
Well, yeah, and I am a big proponent of where full self-driving could take us, because it can solve so many different scenarios. But I also look at, I've been and I've led product development teams in software before, and I understand some of those challenges and what happens with software development, especially as it starts to fork and move into some challenges that some of the engineers either one have with it. Whatever reasoning, you get a rollover in engineering, and it usually sets you back a little bit in terms of overall productivity and the ability to roll out a product.
There's another thing. Karpathy described this, and he's not the only one to talk about this, that AI, machine learning, is what they call software 2.0 and is eating software 1.0. So there were functions of the car that were driven by hand-coded human engineers, software engineers. And gradually the software is learning to take over those functions, and then the engineers who are hand coding how to handle this function or that function are no longer needed. Like we've got that now. The AI has figured out how to do that now, where the AI is better at this. There are things, like you have to write, if this happens, do this, if that happens, do that.
Right, sure.
If you have enough scenarios that you have to throw at it, machine learning is better than hand coding.
Oh, no doubt. Once you get to critical level on machine learning and/or AI, and depending on what level you're at on the software actually writing its own code, and being able to handle the kind of unique scenarios that get thrown at usually your scenario of your development process, it can definitely kind of change the process of that. I guess that's the key. I think I'm just looking for that big release date of FSD to where we can see a lot more miles getting driven on the vehicles in full self-driving mode, to where we can get the number of instances really ramped up, where AI can learn itself and really become fully autonomous, which is kind of the
really
goal.
Quick, every car, including yours, is being is operating in shadow mode all the time.
I understand
so
that.
that software is watching how you drive. It's predicting where you're going to go. If you do something significantly different from where it thought you were going to go, other than you made a left turn when it didn't think you were ready. If you avoided a pothole that it didn't identify as important before, then it might it's learning from your driving, even if you don't have FSD. It is watching how you drive. It is identifying objects. If it gets an identification wrong, that goes back. It is predicting where objects are going to move. This is happening in every Tesla car, whether it has FSD or not. So the implementation of some new version of FSD is not necessary. That you have access to it in your car is not. The software will download and it'll run in shadow mode on your car, whether you know it or not. And that's why, as they spit out 1 million more vehicles in 2021, you've just increased the number of vehicles collecting data for Tesla and identifying problems to make FSD work better. And just to be clear about where I think it's going in terms of FSD going live, somewhere in probably the third quarter, maybe the fourth quarter, Dojo is going to come online. Dojo is going to accelerate the learning. And I believe it's going to increase the quality of the learning. So each step of the learning is going to learn more, and it's going to increase the frequency of the learning. So instead of an update every 2 weeks, it's going to be an update every 3 days. And so that increasing the pace and increasing the quality radically increases the speed at which FSD gets better.
All right. So recent deal with Lyft, Hyundai, and Motional. So Motional, of course, is basically a full self-driving, pilot center. They're trying to work on developing something that creates an autopilot or a full self-driving potential solution. Do you see this as other companies, whether it's Hyundai or other manufacturers, that really start to pour into these new startups, everybody from Comma AI and what the guys over there are doing, Motional, some of these companies, eventually someone's going to get this right, because there's just so many engineers working on this now. So with that being the potential, do you feel comfortable that we could see multiple fully autonomous vehicle platforms?
Yes, but
all right.
There's two problems with having an autonomous vehicle. And Tesla is solving both of them, and a lot of these companies are only solving one of them. One problem is getting it to work and getting it to work well, which I think Tesla will have solved first. I think other people will solve it at some point. I would just remind people always saying, "Oh, the competition is coming. Once these big companies get on it, they'll catch up to Tesla." Like, well, okay, they're not that much bigger than Tesla anymore. They probably have smaller research divisions working on this than Tesla, but SpaceX started landing orbital rocket boosters in 2015. Where's the competition, right?
Yeah.
This is a huge change. If it's so easy to do what Tesla's doing, what Elon Musk is doing, then why isn't the competition there? So, but I do think, you give it 5 years or 10 years, somebody else is going to come up with a self-driving solution. But the second problem is a much bigger problem after that, which is, can you get the cost of the vehicle and the cost of operation low? So if Tesla delivers a self-driving vehicle that costs 5 cents a mile to operate, and Waymo delivers a self-driving vehicle that costs $1 a mile to operate, who wins? Right?
Yeah,
there's no question about it. Tesla wins. So
probably why the CEO of Waymo just said, "I'm done."
No, he listened to the Carpathy interview. He's like, "Oh, that's it. We're not going to compete with that.
Yeah, we're out of this."
Oh my God, we're so far behind these guys. So no, I think that somebody will come along and somebody will solve it. But if you deliver FSD in a $100,000 vehicle that lasts 100,000 miles, then that's $1 a mile just on the depreciation of the vehicle, and you got to add in energy costs. And if your vehicle is using a LiDAR that uses 5 times as much energy as Tesla's FSD chips, well, now you've reduced the range of the vehicle, and you've increased the cost because you're using more energy per mile. So you have to not only deliver a vehicle that can drive itself, you have to deliver a vehicle that costs less per mile. And that's why the 2023 Compact is so important. I mean, Model 3 and Model Y are already low cost per mile compared to these other things, but the 2023 Compact is going to take that to the next level.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so your theory is, it could happen, but it's going to be it's going to be the second rate system on the platform that eventually will be out there.
There's a bigger problem, which is there's a first mover advantage, right? So Tesla gets there, and Tesla's delivering self-driving cars that are providing services that, the internal cost is a nickel a mile, and they're charging 25 cents a mile, let's say, or 50 cents a mile for the service. I'm making up the number, but you're looking at your research project, your research, and you're saying, okay, we think we can deliver this FSD system in 5 years, and our cost per mile is going to be 75 cents a mile when we get there in 5 years. What's the point of, and it's going to cost us $100 billion to build this system, right? Or $10 billion. What's the point of investing $10 billion in this system or $100 billion in this system? You're not going to be able to make money on it because Tesla, if you see that Tesla's so far ahead on both points, getting the FSD working and getting the cost down, you've got to say, we're going to be able to deliver this. It's going to cost us this much to develop it, and we're going to have a competitive product. Now, there's room for other competitors, right? I'm not saying that Tesla has to occupy the whole space, but you have to move fast and you have to deliver at low cost. And if you can't do both, then by the time you get there, Tesla's grown and taken up the market share. There's not enough market share left for it to have been worth your investment. So if you're looking right now and saying, are we going to invest $50 billion in this project? Because people talk about Apple all the time. Oh, Apple's going to deliver autonomous cars. Like, have you seen Apple's speech recognition?
I get to use it every day.
Have you seen their autocorrect? I mean, if they can't do speech recognition and autocorrect, do you think they're going to do self-driving cars?
It's a bit dismal, yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm not going to trust an Apple self-driving car yet.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I like it. All right, so let's move to when you look at the expansion, because full self-driving is going to lead us over to full autonomy. This moves us obviously into robotaxi. I've seen countless models on robotaxi, including Kathy Wood's kind of ARK Invest and their whole model of where robotaxi is moving. We did a counterpoint to that on robo delivery. And the idea was that to your point, is that eventually the compact vehicle would be the target vehicle for robo delivery because of its size, cost, and potentially its interchangeability, as you kind of talked to and alluded to. So robo delivery, especially for food, let's just go with the food market because that's the biggest market out there. Our market and model analysis puts a revenue stream of around $2 trillion additionally, with only a 30% market share when you look at the global impact of food delivery today, because it's the number one in terms of transactions for services that are out there. It's why Uber flipped and pretty much spun their model to Uber Eats. It's why Postmates and Grubhub and the likes have had such a kind of a success run here.
Sorry,
if you look at that,
$2 trillion in revenue.
$2 trillion in revenue.
Okay.
Not in market cap.
Right.
In revenue.
Okay.
Yeah, revenue. And that's with that's if the model that we did showed Tesla coming in at around a 10% fee. The only concern, and I just did a video on this, when I look at robo delivery, is potentially the drone applications that could be coming very quickly, just because of the straight line of sight. Okay, so it expands. If we go robo delivery with a vehicle, you've got to follow roads unless this thing can hover at 50 feet or something.
SpaceX package, the SpaceX package, yeah.
Right. So so the likelihood is there's some potential here. The question is, maybe is Tesla too late with drones potentially starting to accelerate and potentially being a factor in low lightweight package delivery?
Right. So number one, Kathy Wood in her PDF, their Big Ideas PDF, they talked about drone delivery. So it's a really interesting question. What's the cost of having a drone pick up a meal at a restaurant and bring it to somebody? And the beautiful thing about drones is if you can imagine somebody who lives in a condo that's on the 4th floor that has a patio, right? A drone could deliver to your patio.
Right.
A robotaxi can't deliver to your patio. So I definitely think there are places where drones are going to make sense. I think that my gut tells me, actually, it was one of those things when you started talking about delivery, I started thinking, maybe my single passenger pod car vehicle doesn't make sense for humans yet, but it might make sense for delivery vehicles. So maybe you're able to make a vehicle that's, because my picture of the smaller vehicle is it's half the width and half the length of a current car. So it's a quarter the size. Yeah. And you're able to produce a lot more of them at a lot lower cost. So that might make more sense. This interesting idea was, how do you get the delivery from the vehicle to the customer? Does the customer come out and pick it up? Do you have a robot in the car that carries it out and delivers it? The FSD, that's actually one of the questions, is when Tesla gets FSD working, and Dojo is there waiting to train more things, maybe it trains Boston Dynamics robots to deliver product, to hop out of the car and deliver something to the front door, or, scale the walls and bring it to the patio. Who knows? So,
well, I think, that's going to come with kind of the expectation you have with Uber Eats, at least short term right now, which most people will go out and pick up their food, and it's a fairly benign model. So I do think it's possible, but you're right. Yes, could we see
I think
pods
both could work.
Actually, yeah, for sure. But my point being is that the model we did was if Tesla were to go into full robo delivery, there's a $2 trillion revenue opportunity here for a company that can do it with only 30% of the market share, just because of the number of transactions. So logistics, all those kind of things, I think the compact is the way to go. I don't see any of the robo-taxi network on the full passenger vehicles being used for this. Maybe they will be in the beginning, because it'll be kind of, hey, let's fix this problem with what we have available at the time. So going to be interesting to go there for sure.
So I think one picture I have is you've got, let's say you take the compact, but you put like the small van version on it, right? You have the small van thing instead of a passenger vehicle. Right. And then it pulls up to the person. It's serving, like, delivering meals or delivering whatever, deliveries. And it pulls up to your house and you get a text, hey, I'm outside, come pick up your food, come pick up your delivery. And you're told it's in compartment 14, your code is 3725.
Right.
Yeah. So you can only open compartment 14 because you only have the code for compartment 14. So you can't steal somebody else's product.
Yeah, it's all mobile device. It'll be Bluetooth recognized.
Right.
Full
Maybe it
thing.
recognizes your phone when you walk in, the door opens,
Yeah.
you pick up your product, you walk back out of the van, or maybe it's got doors on the side or something and it opens the relevant compartment for you and it closes
Sure.
again and it drives on to the next delivery. I think there's a lot of potential for that to work. And it's actually, it's one of those things where it's really hard to picture it's almost like I would say no one can know for sure which model is going to win that battle. Like, I question
You're right.
whether the drone model works. I question whether you can deliver the drone model, because I think Kathy Wood said it'd be like 25 cents a delivery with the drone. So I'm like, I don't know if they can deliver that cheap.
Amazon came in at 88 cents on their analysis per delivery for a 25-mile flight radius. But again, my concern with drones is still going to be battery. This was their analysis.
Wow.
I guess a buck is cheap. But that's using a 25-mile line of sight, so the ability to go line of sight, so it expands radius versus what an automotive scenario would be, or at least a road vehicle of some sort, which I still kind of think some of these three-wheel vehicles, whether it's Arcimoto or Aero or some of those, could get into that space, especially if they go in and license Tesla's
Wait, 88 cents
autonomy.
a delivery or 88 cents a mile?
88 cents a delivery. 88 cents.
I just find that I'm gonna have to look that up. I find that hard to believe.
Yeah.
I'm
I'll
taking
send you
notes.
the research.
I'm
I'll
taking
send you
notes.
the research on it. We just finished the analysis on drone delivery, and that was one of the ones that still blew me away. Where do they see that potentially happening in terms? Because my concern there is still batteries and chargeability, because drones, of course, are high power sucks because of the rotation of those copters. So there's a lot going on there.